Alright guys, Touch Cry back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoyed your day so far, and welcome to episode 22 of the Breaking Point podcast, joined once again by Lion Man and Easy Mac. Absolutely love to see it. Cracking weekend of Call of Duty, and guess what? In just a couple of days' time, we're back to a LAN environment. The CDL is returning for the Stage 4 Major. Absolutely superb stuff. Also superb has been your support on the podcast as of late. Really appreciate all the likes, comments, subscriptions on the YouTube channel. Keeps on rolling on that side. Spotify as well has been doing fantastic. So if you want to check us out on all the other platforms, feel free to do so in that description box below. Let's dive into things then, boys. I mean, cracking weekend of Call of Duty. I'm not sure how much of it you got to watch. I mean, so many things that were really important this week. It was great to have a stage where right down to the final Sunday, everything was on the line.
Yeah, that last OpTic game, who they play? LA. That was oh goodness. So that was one of the worst thrashings I've ever seen in the COD League. If it wasn't for that S&D on standoff and getting that dub so I just can't even talk about how badly they got demolished in all respawns.
Up there to when we beat them 3-0.
Yeah, it might be even worse, but
the slaying was worse, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
just outrageous, really, how that went down. I mean, any opening thoughts, Austin, before we crack with the show?
Nothing much, really. Just excited to get on with the week because we got a big week ahead of us.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. Wow, so exciting, honestly. Before we dive into things, I wanted to talk about something which is kind of related to this whole LAN topic. There was a bit of drama that went down several days ago now between Crimsix and Formal. We saw on the timeline there was certainly something that came out. Formal was like, yo, which player would I have dropped if I had the chance to back in the day? He said Crimsix during the Black Ops 3 Dynasty era. And then, DeSoto tweeted out looking for some sort of impression, the drill, like fair play to them. And okay, Crimsix comes in, the replies, a bit of back and forth between him and Formal, most certainly. A lot of discussion regarding the champs, basically when they won the World Championship, the prize money that for the MVP, the $25,000 that Formal said, or at least they agreed before the tourney they were going to split. Formal decided not to do so. And, certainly there's been some talk about that. Now, maybe we wouldn't have talked about it, Austin, but just the fact that they are matching up on LAN at the very first time of asking it, just a few days' time. When this first happened, I was like, yeah, please let us get this matchup on LAN. As it's worked out, it's honestly pretty perfect for storylines.
Yeah, it is pretty perfect. It reminds me of when, Dallas and Chicago faced off at the first event for the CDL, and that was the one where Formal and Scump were yelling over to the other side. So it's like perfect. It's like writing a story. So hopefully the match is as good as advertised, because most of the times when it's this hyped up, it ends up being like a 3-0, like really quick. So hopefully it actually is a really good match.
Yeah, and I also love how there's actual good storylines heading into LAN as well. And some of the stuff that they said about each other, especially Crim towards Formal, talking about the MVP and not sharing the earnings for MVP. It's like they have so much dirt on each other because they teamed for so long. Of course, like they're just going to throw each other under the bus. But I bet they have so much more as well that they haven't said. So who knows? Could get even more spicy in the coming days if that game goes long. I don't know. We'll see.
It's wonderful stuff. And there's also the whole storyline I just thought about, the fact that like last season there was a big discussion between OpTic versus Dallas, or at the time it was Huntsman, right? The fact that Huntsman were 3-0 against them on LAN, and then it went online, and then Dallas win the rest of the season. So it's like, it's just an interesting one, right? Because now we're back to LAN, and the OpTic Huntsman guys are still technically undefeated against Dallas Empire on LAN. So have to see how that one develops. The other massive story that came out, I mean, obviously the Huke staff for understandable reasons. We're not going to go into the entirety of that video. We saw how that ended for the flank. We will talk, though, about what happened with the Los Angeles Thieves lineup, because, wow, like, absolute chaos, to be quite honest. Huke and Slasher back on that team. I guess it was predictable in a way, but just crazy, like the fact that they made so many changes on, so I don't really know what to say anymore. Like Venom comes out, Draza comes out. We can certainly talk later about whether the entirety of the move was the correct one. From my standpoint, very exciting change. Like really excited to see how this team would play throughout the week. Started off pretty good, didn't end so well that we can get into. But going back to a LAN environment, Slasher, Huke, Kenny, TJ, in theory, it's like the best lineup you could maybe put together, but for a LAN environment in theory, but whether that actually translates to practice is another question. And I do kind of wonder how much say JKap had in this. I know that we're kind of discussing it on the flank, whether Nadeshot was like, look, we're paying an absolute bag for Slasher and Huke to sit on our bench. We're going back to LAN. Like, I'm not letting that happen. Or someone maybe just said, like, look, we put the back in. Like, that's just, I'm making the call regardless of how it went. Maybe that was what went down. Obviously, it's tough to say.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say without being inside of there, but it seems like JKap, in the past, he's talked about how good of a communicator and player that Venom is. He talked about on the pre-show that there was going to be no more changes this year. And then all of a sudden, there's changes. So it makes it seem like it wasn't his call to do this. But, I mean, yeah, the names on the roster are great. Honestly, I think a lot of teams are just hoping they play better on LAN, which I don't think is really realistic. But, it's time that you kind of got to put all of your most talented players on the team and to see how it goes, because you haven't seen Huke and Slasher yet together. And so I think this weekend will be a real make or break for this four as a lineup. I think if you see someone like majorly underperform, you'll see probably Draza come back in, I would guess.
Yeah, last week I mentioned something about LA. I think I said it's too late for them to make another change for them to be effective by LAN. And it is tough because now they've only had like another week to prepare for this next tournament. Slash has been out for like 4 months. And it's like, how do they expect to be at a competitive level within a week of practice? And I just don't know. And that's why it's probably the best time before LAN, because that does switch it up for everyone. But I just feel bad for Venom and Draza because they still haven't played on LAN. Draza's been in the league for 2 years and he hasn't played a single event not online. So that's just unfortunate. But yeah, we'll see how they are next week. I don't think they're going to be unbelievable by that time, but who knows? Anything can actually happen on LAN, I guess.
Yeah, he knows, right? Slasher comes back to LAN, drops a 1.4, standard procedure. But yeah, well, interestingly, their first matchup will be against Los Angeles Gorillas. We're not going to go through the matches of this week and how everything transpired, because LAG, let's talk about them first. Just woeful. I don't know if there's really too much more to say. They get completely bodied by Toronto. Then they go up against, who did they play next? They lost to London, right, as well. They lost 3-1. I think they won over controlling that or something, but still, it's just one of those teams. It's like, I know we just feel like we're talking about it every week, but they make this vivid change. They look better for a time, but like everyone said at the time, look, this is not a long-term plan. My question is to you, Austin, what do you do with this team at the moment? Let's say you're the GM of Los Angeles Gorillas. You're going into next season. What's your plan with LAG? Do you keep anyone? Do you axe the entire team? Like, is it time for Apathy to retire? Is it time for Silly and Assault to retire? Like, I don't really know at this point, but clearly the team isn't working. If you're trying to win, you've got to make substantial changes. I don't know where the pieces on this team go if they are removed of this team, especially if there's no expansion.
Yeah, I mean, this season you're kind of stuck with what you have right now, unless they bring up one of their academy players, because I'm pretty sure you can't make a change after this next LAN. So unless they already are signed to a subcontract, so I don't think you're going to see anything major happen in the next stage. But for next season, realistically, the organization itself probably has the most amount of they're up there with the most amount of money behind backing their org. There's a lot behind it, so this is definitely an organization that's probably going to try to spend big in the free agency again, I would guess. So if I'm their GM, I'm pretty much just waiting. I'm scouting talent for the end of the year. Honestly, there's a lot of good prospects overseas, and there's a lot still homegrown. So what I would be doing is scoping out a veteran like Gunless per se, and have him lead a group of youngsters, like a Nastie, like a Nolson, some of the players that are still down there. I mean, even Pander this year has been seen a resurgence in the AM scene. So I would try to look for a veteran, kind of splash on the veteran to kickstart your roster, and then add a bunch of young moldable pieces, because the past 2 years now they have tried to get veteran talent, and it's just not working out. It's like they're paying for the names instead of the chemistry and skill behind them. So I think this year is probably one of those years where you just got to switch up what you've been doing.
Yeah, they it is true. Like for the last 2 years, all they did is get big names that were successful in CODs a long time ago. World War II now at this point is 3 years ago. And it's like I wonder if they'll even be able to get names that are good enough to compete next year. Because most of the good players are already on teams signed for what, multiple year deals or like
Most of them
you know,
are one and ones. So
one? Okay.
so you're going to see actually a lot of free agents this next year because of the
Ooh.
1-1 from year one. Obviously, this will be the second year, so you're going to see a lot of free agents this year.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think their best bet, I think we also said this like 2 weeks ago, would be to complete after this LAN, because this LAN might completely change things. They are veterans on LAN, to be fair. But if things go bad, start aiming at ideas for next year. Like Austin said, just look for players that can maybe be that like cornerstone for the team for the future, and look for players that aren't just known for their names or previous results. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, to be honest, about like, because you think back in World War II, like 2018, like how many players that were the top tier of today were even playing? Like Abizi was playing league play. I mean, obviously he wasn't the pro league for a while, but he kind of got known that season for just dominating ranked. Simp wasn't even playing yet. Like, think how different the scene was then when Assault and Silly and Apathy won the World Championship to when it is today. And obviously they beat some great teams, but I mean, things were very different back then.
Also, think about the fact that they weren't even that good that year. They won one event and got somewhat blessed with their bracket. I mean, they did come second at Seattle as well, but they weren't top level that year. And it's
Play
like
that
I don't
event like
understand
100
why
times, they win like a
two,
handful, maybe.
one,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But then they went into Black Ops 4 and they got bodied on Envy, won like 3 SNDs all year. And then what
Oh my
the year after was last year, bad again. And then I don't know why you'd, it's so mean for me to say, but I don't know why you'd keep them on your roster after they've lost so continuously and so consistently for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I guess they got sold on the whole 4v4, like boots on the ground type stuff, but it is what it is. Another team that I think the general manager should be an interesting spot of is London, because in a somewhat similar boat, Afro had a really great series this week against LAG, absolutely firing on all cylinders. I was very impressed. What do you do if you're London, right? Because clearly this team, you're probably not going to go with it going forwards. Do you want to go back to a full UK team, which is something you might consider? But PaulEhx has arguably been your best player since he's joined the squad. So if it were me, I think I've seen a lot of people discuss this particular team of four. So I'll just throw it out there, Austin. You can take and run with it however you like, because Nastie is obviously a player that you talk a fair bit about. People were discussing, okay, Zero, you try and get him back, you get him out to the States. Personally, if I was a general manager out there, Zero would be one of the very first people I'm looking at, because I don't think a lot of people are talking about him right now. Very versatile, veteran of the scene, incredible talent, can be a top 10 player in the game. I'd try and get Zero, keep Afro, no doubt about it, get Nastie in, and then have PaulEhx on the team as well. Have maybe Zero as your main AR, he can certainly run that. PaulEhx is kind of the flex, Afro, Nastie is the SMGs. Maybe that's a way to go. There's a lot of options here. Of course, not building around Shawnee would be, maybe it wouldn't be the best idea, maybe it would, right? I mean, it's tough to say, they've stuck with him the last couple of seasons, but that four-man team is something that I saw and I thought, okay, I can kind of work with that.
It honestly depends on one who is in the management there, because honestly, a lot of the best European players are already like on Toronto. You have Maddie on Paris, so you have a lot of European talent elsewhere right now. Just English talent right now. Obviously, you have like Paco, the French phenom with New York, and you have a couple other pieces elsewhere, like CleanX too. But right now it's kind of tough, because if you were to say like who are the four best English talent, like it's going to be really tough to get them, because realistically, like if this team wants four English players, like is PaulEhx, like would you be able to trade him for like let's say like a Maddie on Paris, so you could do like a swap there? But would Maddie come back to London? Would Trey even come back to London after what happened this season? So there's a lot that goes into it. I do think Nastie should be like their top target. I think he's the best European player right now that's not signed to a franchise. So I think that's a pretty much no-brainer. I would be pretty much in discussions with him already. I think Afro is a solid piece to build around. Obviously, he's been a little bit off and on, but he's shown a lot of like bright spots. So I think that's a solid start in the SMG. If I start with those two, I definitely signed a capable sub as well. Definitely probably a flex player, so you have like a fallback plan, because you got to think of not just your starting four, but also your fifth man. So there's a lot to go into it, but that 4-man of Trey, Afro, Nastie, and Paul would be pretty good. It'd be a pretty good building block to start off with.
I agree with that roster, but I don't agree with the idea that the team needs to be English. Like, look at Toronto. It's a Canadian team. The whole team's European. Like, they don't need British players. They just need to be competitive. And so if they need to get players from NA, because the league's situated in NA, it would probably be easier. Like, just get the team to as good as possible, find pieces that can make the team good, and that's really it. Like, do you think they need to be British, Rab?
I mean, it's a good question. Like, because obviously last year they had Jurge, right? He's Irish, so like not quite. At least at the start of the season. Like it's an interesting one, right? Because you go to LAN and having an English team is actually a really big thing, I think, in a LAN environment. Like for the crowd to get behind the team, that's a factor to at least some degree. Now, whether I think like 3-1 is probably fine, but like myself, I just really enjoy rooting for European Call of Duty in general. And the fact, like, I'm basically more of a Toronto fan right now than London fan for sure, because Toronto are actually a full European team. And that actually means quite a lot to me, because when you win an event as like a European COD fan, like when, for example, Splice or whatever, it's different if you have one North American player, because then American fans could be like, oh, you know, the American guy, like he was the glue, like he had the championship experience or whatever it was. Like there's always that discussion that could be had. Like let's say Splice in Infinite Warfare had like someone else instead of Mac or something. It was an American player that had won before. Then the discussion's like, yeah, look, right, you know, wasn't fully European team. So to me, that matters to some degree. I think it's great to see where Toronto are. Whether London have to do that, that's another question. But it is kind of like their mission, their culture, that they would try and do that. Obviously, this season has been a complete outlier, and last season as well, kind of crazy. Understandable they've got Paul. If it were me, though, because I think there's a lot of people in a similar boat to me that like the London team, kinda, but given Bance, I mean, you've got Bance, Cammy, Insight, all from the UK. Clinix is a great guy. It's like that, if anything, is a team that's much better to support. Also, they make much better content. So there's a few reasons why I think if you're London, you've actually got to think about how do you get the UK fans to actually probably support your team. Something to consider at least. I don't know if you have any follow up on the line.
I agree with that, and I can see that, but it is almost just like bragging rights. And if they can't even win an event or even get close, win a series for that matter, what's the point?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I agree.
I understand. And also without LANs in the UK, like obviously the London events are the most hyped events, and like I would love to go to one day to like really see the support that you guys show. Because British fans, like let's just get it clear, like British fans are clearly the best fans in like sport and anything, because they just get so passionate about supporting their teams. The chants are ridiculous. And like you know, and so I understand that side because it would make it more hype for them to watch like their home team. But without LAN events in the UK at the moment, like there also really isn't much point there. So I think being competitive first is right now the most integral part. But if we're going to talk about, okay, just continue. Next part.
No, okay, it's all good. I mean, yeah, I guess we talked a fair bit on London there. I did want to discuss like a couple of key topics before you leave us, Lion. First one being OpTic, right? I think we can probably just go through their week because it was a crazy week. Let's just clean it up that way, right? Because they play Seattle, and this is like classic OpTic. I don't understand how they keep doing this. They always seem to be a team that somehow, like, if there's a meme that they can possibly fall into or something that can go wrong drastically that you wouldn't really expect, OpTic is always the team to like slip up on the banana peel. You know what I mean? They lose to Seattle. Seattle's first series win in 10 or in 11, technically. They were 10 in a row, then they beat OpTic. They lose, this is just the remarkable thing to me, they lost a checkmate control to Seattle, that Seattle had not won a control in 10 series since the start of April. They had then, well, in addition, they'd not won checkmate control all year. A great map for OpTic, as we saw later in the week, and OpTic lose it to them. What's going on? People have been talking about, okay, OpTic, they've got no plan B, whatever. They lose to Seattle. I mean, I couldn't really believe it. Sometimes it happens, though. There's always a chance that an upset happens. OpTic probably came in somewhat complacent, thinking this is an easy series victory, as kind of understandably so, but no easy series victories here in the CDL. a lot of great talent on Seattle. We talk about it every week. They just can't seem to put it together. Then later in the week, they play Thieves. Huge matchup for them. Of course, the way it turned out, because Paris beat Seattle, it meant that Los Angeles Thieves had to 3-0 them. So all OpTic had to do was get a single map, and they'd be guaranteed winners. But winning the series gave them the second seed, which is pretty nice because it puts them in. Well, they're not in FaZe's side of the bracket, let's just say. And this Thieves series was completely dominant, right? Like it's tough to say without actually watching the series how much of a bloodbath this actually was. Like the slaying numbers. In 4 maps, they outslayed by 85 kills. I don't really see anything like it. The control was over in a heartbeat. OpTic just turned up and looked like, I don't know, for some reason they always seem to turn up in grudge match series, Austin. Probably maybe against you guys on FaZe. But when there's like this discussion, Slasher versus Kenny, Slasher versus, Formal, Slasher versus Kenny, Formal versus Slasher and Kenny, it seems like Formal always comes up to play, and OpTic always tend to get the better of these series that really have some key storylines. That's kind of how I see it. But it's just such a strange week for OpTic, Austin, but they find their way over the line.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the epitome of them. Like, they're really inconsistent at times, and at the end of the day, it was a group stage match, so they probably weren't 100% locked in like they would be for a bracket match. So I can see where they weren't 100% just like locked in and ready to go, and kind of Seattle just was able to take advantage of that because Seattle was still, I think, fighting for their tournament life. So, it's a red flag that they lost that series, but coming in and beating LA the way that they did is also like, it's reassuring, but it's also like, why is it so easy against LA and then so difficult against Seattle? So those are just like some questions you got to have at the end of the day. Obviously, they have a lot of talent, and when they're clicking, and you could just see that LA team just had no answers for them, and it was clinical. So it's like OpTic are a threat, but until they find that consistency, like it's tough to have them to like predict them winning tournaments, because like it literally, what was it, 2 days in between that match? So it's like literally a coin flip for which OpTic you get on the day. Do you get the one that looked so sloppy against Seattle and couldn't get anything going, or do you get the other side of the coin where they're just destroying LA Thieves? So that's like something I would like to see them improve upon going into LAN and the stage 5, is just like finding that consistency. Like every match you're playing at the same level, you're not having these high peaks and valleys, you know what I mean? So that'll be something they'll have to work on.
They seem to have a lot of external factors that seem to impact the way they play. Like Seattle shouldn't even, on a good day, Seattle shouldn't even get close to Chicago, especially winning a control when they haven't won for so long. And then when we look at the LA Thieves series, do you think it's possible that because they didn't win map 1, they kind of just lost all hope and didn't really push for that victory like, they needed? But
I was thinking that might be a possibility. I mean, like they did win the game 2, and I know what you mean. Like to me, it felt like as soon as OpTic won map 1, the series was like over. Because like the implications were kind of over, and obviously at that point OpTic are the only ones really with something to fight for the second seed. So I kind of get what you're saying, Lion, but still, I mean, the way they finished out the series was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I think in the control, like Slasher and Huke combined for like 7 and 34 or something.
Sorry,
like
that's ridiculous.
Something that bad. And yeah, those 2 players, who are the 2 players that they just brought in, I don't think, that's a very good sign. But it is early days, I guess.
I mean, it's the second time that Thieves have been absolutely bodied on checkmate control. I'm pretty sure they hold the 2 quickest controls of the season. That one against OpTic yesterday, or 2 days ago, as you guys are listening to this, and then the quickest one of the season is still them versus London earlier in the season, which was like a 4-minute 15-second game when Dylan was still on the team. So, like, the fact that made it through, I guess they thought, okay, Seattle beat OpTic, it's easy, but like, it didn't really work out like that. Remarkable.
Sorry, yawning.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, early morning for you. I guess the final thing I wanted to say on OpTic before we go on to talk about the New York stuff is, I just find it remarkable how quickly everything flip-flops. I think maybe I said this last week, but this week emphasized it to a degree that we've rarely seen. They lose to Seattle. It's like, oh, all right, who are you dropping? Has Envoy got to go? Scump and Formula washed. Time to get him out. Like, and, I kind of get that if you're an OpTic fan and you see your team lose to Seattle, and then a few days later it's like, wow, OpTic are back. They're going to be a huge threat to the major. But I agree with you, Austin. It's like, if the consistency isn't there, this is why, thankfully, I think if you're an OpTic fan, they're starting in winners because at least you've got a slip up. Because if you're in losers, this is the thing with OpTic, right? I'm never going to bet on them to make a losers run all the way through to the grand finals and win. Like, they're always going to have a slip up, I think. I know they do catch fire and momentum and stuff. Like, that is a big thing with this team, especially on LAN. So maybe it's different on LAN than it is in online, where you kind of just hop in, day out, as we've talked about before. But it still seems to me that there's some series that they go in and they just don't, that maybe they lose map one in like a fashion where they kind of choke it away and then the team isn't quite there. But when things are going in their favor, they're really going in their favor. That it's just the problem is that the really top teams are too good to let that happen consistently, Austin.
Yeah, so exactly. So they're just gonna have to find a way to be more consistent, so they can start picking off some of these matches where if they're not firing at 100%, like they'll still be able to grind it out. Because right now, you see them blow out matches, but like when it gets kind of closer, I believe Dab's round 11 was tweeted it out when it's a little bit closer, especially in like the hard points, they're not closing it out as often. So that'll just because you're not going to be able to completely blow out like Toronto, like New York, our team. Like you're not going to be able to blow out some of these teams. So you got to be able to grind out the close matches at the end of the day. So finding that consistency is going to be like key for them for their future and like title hopes.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. I think interesting you mention that because, as you say, a lot of the top teams they do a really good job of closing out these close games. And yes, OpTic did win that game 4 against Seattle. They kind of clutched up. Dashu went mental. But I mean, we'll talk about New York next because first of all, they 3-0. Did they 3-0? Let me just check what they did. They 3-0 London. Not too many issues there. Then they come up against Toronto, though, and they honestly got picked apart, I think. Like, this was clinical from Toronto. They played a phenomenal series. Game 1 was really interesting, fundamentally fantastic. Toronto winning this, to me, spelt the end of the season, or the end of the season, or what am I saying? Series already, because New York have not been great at search, and they certainly haven't been good at control, but Toronto are unbelievable. So this was a great Game 1, and this, I think, is exactly what you're talking about, Austin, right? That Toronto, in a close fought map, and we saw it with you guys against Minnesota Rokkr most definitely, when it's down to the wire, and it's a close game, 225 to 205, I think this one ended, Toronto are the type of team that can get over the line and close those games out, and, OpTic seems to have a harder time in those situations, but the New York stuff that's really interesting is the whole Asim situation. The fact that for whatever reason with the visa, he had the wrong visa, didn't have it, I don't really know. Can't get out to the States. It seems, at least as of recording this, he made a tweet longer today saying that it's very, very unlikely indeed right now that he'll be able to get out there for the Stage 4 major out of Canada. That obviously is a big deal for them because they came off a championship finals run at last stage. They made the finals of Stage 3 up against you guys, and this would have been their perfect opportunity to try and go one better. Without Asim, I think that's a very tough task, Lion. And also, who do they even potentially get, right? Because there's been a lot of discussion in the amateur scene, people turning them down. I guess they've signed someone already, but I guess they need like some sort of selfless SMG player for Asim. But regardless of how it goes, it's probably not going to end well for New York, and it's tough. It's really unfortunate, right? I was looking forward to seeing them play here on LAN.
Yeah, it looked like throughout this year they just slowly got better and better and better. Like even though they haven't won a stage, they just look like such a cohesive unit as that core group, especially with Asim, Clay, and I guess Mac as well. They've been there all year. And so it is strange that not having him is going to make such a big impact. And especially, it is weird that no player really wants to jump in there apart from Doug. But anyway, I think they'll still be decent because Parko's so good. He's just still one of their best players, and I think they should still be somewhat decent. But because the league is so competitive this year, losing a selfless player like Asim might actually rock them pretty hard, and especially in the communication side. Because that team, that is the number one thing about them, I believe, is that they're so just on it with every little piece of communication that they give each other, especially Clay and Asim. And so those two not being, a unit together, giving all the information out, that might be a lot tougher, especially if it's not a player that is, selfless like Asim. So I don't know. I'd want to see them do well, but I feel like this is just going to shoot them in the foot. What do you reckon, Austin?
Yeah, I mean they just lost their MVP. Honestly, in my mind, Asim is a major like contributor for the comms, not only for like communication on the map, but also like he's a positive vocal leader. After like losses, like you hear him speak about it all the time. Like when they're down in S&D, he's always hyping up the guys and bringing up their confidence and having them ready for the next map. And they don't have that anymore. And he's also their entry man. I think he's probably one of the best in the league at sliding in first, being selfless, just being like that nuisance on the map. He's very aggro, so he has a lot of map control, map pressure, and all of this they're going to miss. And to have any like lofty expectations for the team going in, maybe they'll just play like they have nothing to lose, and they'll be able to trip some teams up, which is always a positive. But I mean, in reality, it's just a tough loss at such a crucial moment of the season. But at the end of the day, it's not stage 5, it's not champs, so might as well happen now, right? So, as for the replacement, I mean, there's a bunch of really good guys. Obviously, right now, what the problem is there is an open tournament for the amateurs, and the prize pool, I believe, is 50,000 or 40,000, and that's all. That's like a big chunk of cash for them. But not only that, but they also have the elite, which I believe is also 50,000. Coming up the week after, they have the qualifiers for it. So if they sign a 14-day contract with New York, they wouldn't be able to do either of those. So that's a major reason. So let's say like a Pentagram does it for Built by Gamers, or someone whose spot would be taken by someone. They wouldn't be able to go back to that team. They would just be kind of like left out after this event. And just talking to some of the players, that's kind of like their mindset. It's not that they don't want to risk it or something like that. They just don't. They didn't know if Asim was even going to miss the event, because this was kind of like still a 50-50 going in. So they weren't even sure if like they would sign this 14-day, not be able to compete in the amateur side, and then Asim comes and plays in the LAN tournament, so they would just be kind of like left out to dry at that point. So that's why I think a couple of them said no. But as for like suitable replacements, obviously like Desi's name has been thrown around a lot. Other than that, I mean, you have guys like Gentroid. You guys have like Rex. You guys, a really underrated name is Ulysses. He's been phenomenal the last couple of stages. Saints was obviously he was thrown in there, but he, as Crone reported, he didn't answer in time. So whoever they did sign, hopefully they'll be able to get at least a little bit of practice going in, maybe tomorrow, Wednesday. So they'll at least have some practice as a unit, but still, it's kind of hard to have them winning the tournament now with a stand-in,
Sorry to cut myself off there, but Lion had to dip out. Unfortunately, some sort of server issue with Discord. You know how it is. Then he's got to head off to work. But what I was saying was regarding some of these other amateur players' decisions, because to me, like the Dell Decimate stuff, I certainly get what you're talking about, Austin, but at the same time, joining a top 3 team like New York, especially, you don't get too many opportunities to play with Clayster. Like, that is an opportunity that doesn't come around too often, and there's certainly a lot to be gained from that, I think, just from your own personal ability and understanding what it takes to be the best. And even playing with Clayster for a few days, I'm sure you could probably learn a lot from it. Obviously, the rest of the team's phenomenal as well. So it's just interesting. Like, it's not quite the same situation as the Seattle stuff, because you know that New York aren't going to be keeping you, right? Like Asim, you'd imagine is going to figure his way out of this situation by stage 5 major champs, whatever. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. Like, if it were, I think a lot of amateur players should, well, they should more heavily consider this offer than they would something like an LAG offers them a spot where it could actually hurt their stock. Like, this is a chance, right? I come in for a major. If I really have impact, that could really mean a lot. And I think, I don't know, maybe some players are just somewhat scared that they come in, it doesn't work, it hurts their stock, and then it's not ideal for next season. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on Austin.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's much about the stock going the next season as it was just uncertainty around Asim's situation. And they have like 2 big tournaments coming up this next like week and a half. So it was just, I think it's a combination of uncertainty, and there's kind of stability going on right now. So it's just a whole bunch of mixed bag things. I did see Clay tweet out that he had no hard feelings for people that turned him down, and he understood where they were coming from. So it's just a really, really tough situation. But I mean, luckily it happened now, and Asim should be fine by stage 5. So it's just one little bump in the road for New York.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a team that really, at the start of the year, we were like, all right, by the time it comes to the World Championships, that's when they're going to really be a force. That's at least what I thought. I thought, okay, at some point in the season, they'll bring in Hydra, they'll keep getting better and better. And by champs, there'll be a force for Clay to actually potentially win the thing again. We've already seen that. And really, this could have been a great stepping stone for them to go to LAN as a team, really get some experience. They're not going to be able to get that experience that the other teams are getting going into, for example, stage 5. So lots going on there. I did want to talk about briefly your guys' run because you finish off a 5-0. Just, I mean, quality, just untouchable to be honest at times. The Minnesota series was very interesting though. Of course, bit of a grudge match, right, between Mike and Priest and facing you guys for the first time this season, which is pretty remarkable to think about. They looked good against LA Thieves. If anything, it was LA Thieves looking somewhat pretty good in that series. I mean, Slasher had a crazy good map. Goes game 5, round 11, and they win. And then up against you guys, to me, it was a surprisingly close fought series. Like game 1 certainly probably should have gone Rokkr's way. It was it was a really tough one, to be honest, for Minnesota to lose. But to me, this Rokkr team, there's something about them. They're just somewhat like toothless in the key moments. Like they do really well. They get to the line and then they don't quite have that like clinical nature where they'll just close out a series. Like they have a really hard time like closing out series and maps against some of the big teams, and also even against the lower tier teams, they'll never like just smoke someone 3-0, which some of the best teams will do. So I still think they've got some way to go to look like a championship contender, kind of like they did when they initially brought in Standy.
Yeah, I think they just need someone to be that closer. Like, I think a lot of them perform well at the beginning of the games, and then like when it starts getting tough, they kind of don't have the solidest of team performances. So like they need someone to like really step up at the tail end of games and just be that closer that just kind of like shuts the door. You see that a lot with like Cammy. Cammy will just come in and get like that clutch 2 or 3 piece that you need at the end of the day just to shut down that comeback or complete the comeback for them. And I just don't know on Minnesota right now who is that person. I think they have a couple candidates that could easily be that person, but no one's really stepped up yet. So I do think there's a lot of like positives to build off of. They played us pretty well. They took that garrison control, I believe it was, right? And they took that from us. So, and they won against LA, who arguably isn't the strongest right now, but at least they did what they had to do. So I think that this is like one of the dark horses for the end of the year. I think they should still continue to get better. I think their ARs are some of the best, and they're really, really well at S&D, which we haven't really seen yet. And they have Standy, who's been putting up pretty good numbers, and Attach, who is like that methodical slow SMG, who's been doing pretty well. So I think they just have to put it all together. But they definitely need someone that will just like shut the door at the end of the day, because they just don't have that yet. And I think that's something that will complete the puzzle for them.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head, to be honest there. Another great series was Dallas v Florida. This was a hugely important one to finish off the Saturday. This, of course, set up a Sunday in which Florida ended up needing Toronto to lose to New York to get them that winner's bracket spot, because it would have been a 3-way tiebreaker if New York had gone 5-0. As it was, both Toronto and New York went 4-1 in that Group B, leaving Dallas and Florida both at 3-2. But Dallas won the tiebreaker. Great series, this. Finally, we saw some, I don't know really what to say, because Florida still a little bit iffy to me. I mean, we did talk about them. Obviously, their inconsistencies. They look great one series, then the next series it all goes kind of wrong. They've certainly looked better as of late. I think that they're maybe gearing up quite nicely for a nice losers bracket run here. It's very possible that they pull something like that off. However, the clutch factor from Dallas was finally there. I mean, Shotzzy and Vivid as a duo had a nice series together right here. I mean, Vivid had an awful control, but outside of that, his stats were actually great. Outside of that map that they lost. So really, I mean, it was a great series, no doubt, and a big win for Dallas, like an absolutely huge win for them to guarantee winners here. So finally we saw something from them. It's just tough, right? Because at the end of the day, with Vivid in the team, they're never quite going to have the ceiling they did with Huke. Like, I don't think anyone's going to deny that. at the same time, they're winning some clutch series like this. I mean, it was only one, but they got over the line in an important one. And Crim does always talk about, like, when the stakes are there and the pressure's on, that's when he performs the best. And it's not like statistically he had a great series, but he had some good moments in the Miami Search and Destroy especially. So interesting series, Austin. I don't know what your thoughts are really on either of these teams, because it looked like Florida were in such a great spot to lock up winners after they beat Toronto, and now they're down to losers, right? So it's just one of those things that still they can't quite get over the line. And Dallas, despite looking mediocre, find their way to get to a point, right? And I wonder if they'll make another championship Sunday or make another top four, because I'm pretty sure last stage was like the first time they'd failed to do that since their inception. So it's going to be tough for them, most certainly, though.
Yeah, so starting on Florida, I think they're definitely a team on the rise. They had a good stage. I think they just got kind of like the short end of the stick. They went 3-2, but was starting losers. So they have a lot of good pieces around them. It's just about that consistency. Like their SMG duo, sometimes we'll see them put in like really good work, and then at other times we'll see them kind of like throw away their lives a little bit too much, and it ends up, one or two small mistakes compounds into a big mistake that's like a 50-point swing and a hard point, and then you can kind of look back and see that, but at the end of the day, you kind of just have to continue refining your gameplay and finding that sweet spot. So they're definitely a team on the rise. They would be 100% my dark horse for this tournament to make that losers bracket run, kind of like how we saw Chicago do last time. So they're definitely not out of it. Could see them definitely streaking. Going over to Dallas. Honestly, like their SMG duo, I have some faith in to be up there with the best. I do think Vivid just had a really rough start to this roster. I think he could turn it around. You saw it definitely in that final series. He comes out game 1 looking good, and then the games 2 and 3, it's really lackluster, like bad, and then 4 and 5, it's really good. So he just has to find that consistency within the team. I don't know when that's going to be, but he's definitely got to shore up some of those modes. What I don't have the most faith in is their ARs. I think Crim, as you said, when it's a high pressure situation, he shows up. So I have faith in him. It's just I'm just not sold on Illy yet, being that second star player, because that's kind of like how this roster set up right now. Is Crim is supposed to be like your anchor. He's supposed to be like that guy he just does what needs to be done to win. He's supposed to be that guy in the back. Shotzi's obviously your MVP, your star, like putting up star numbers, which he has continued to do. And Vivid is supposed to be like that selfless SMG that kind of frees up Shotzi and lets him come in second and get one of those, like get that free kill and then the hard kill that follows it for the 2-piece. So right now, Illy is supposed to be that second star, and he has just not been that second star for this team. And that's what they're going to need to beat the other top teams. I just hope it comes sooner rather than later, because now we're 6 months into the season and we still haven't seen. We've seen like flashes, but we just haven't seen anything crazy yet. And that's what he needs. He just needs to have that great tournament. If he doesn't, it just adds up more and more questions going into the tail end of the year.
Yeah, like you can count the amount of great maps probably that Illy has had on one hand this season. Like the amount of games that he's actually taken over and had a lot of impact in, very few and far between. At the end of the day, Dallas are one of those teams that they play great fundamental COD, I think, in a way that they consistently get outslayed and win series, which is impressive. But it's like, I just look at FaZe. If I'm building a team, and Toronto, another good example, are like, all right, here's my team. I've got 2 incredible SMGs. I've got a super aggro guy, and I've got a very patient at times, but also super aggressive guy in Simp. Then I've got Arcees as my main AR. Then I've got Celium, right? And Celium is an incredibly valuable piece because he could just drop a 1.2 consistently over a tourney. And that is like the missing piece for Dallas, really. Like they've got Crim, and Arcees doesn't often have to put up crazy numbers. He can do. He certainly did do, but they don't need that to succeed. And that's where Crim finds himself. Like, he can do all the dirty work he wants and be a solid piece as long as Shotzi and Vivid are going off. But the problem is, to beat a team like FaZe, you're also going to need one of your ARs to be doing great. And that's pretty much always the case between Celium and Arcees. And they just don't have, like, a Celium, basically. They don't have a Cammy, right, who can do it in that role. So that is what Illy needs to be. Like, Illy, if they want to be a contender, he needs to be a Cammy or a Celium, pretty much. Or a Dashi, for example. That's the level he needs to hit if they want to win championships. It's just as simple as that. And if he can't, then this team isn't going to win, I don't think, until they get a player that can do that. So interesting. I mean, It's exciting to see them. I mean, them against OpTic is probably going to be a cracker with any luck. Now, I do want to talk about Thieves as well, because first series, they looked great against Rokkr. Slasher completely took over game 4. I mean, it was crazy. It just completely bodied them on Moscow. Like, not a map that I think Minnesota whenever they play it, I'm like, I don't know. It just seems wrong when they play Moscow. I don't really understand what they're doing a lot of the time on Moscow Hardpoint. They consistently they either lose close games, or I don't know what their record is in it, but I don't imagine it's particularly good. But yeah, Thieves completely demolished them on this one. But then a few days later, they themselves get completely destroyed in a key series, right? This is where like Slasher and Kenny be formal. That was the whole thing going into it. I was expecting like some fireworks, maybe a game 5. At least, you know, for Slasher maybe to show that, yeah, okay, I'm back. I'm here to put on a show. Didn't happen, like nowhere near the level. And that's the question now. I don't think they're going to do anything before LAN, because their whole thought process, I mean, even in their tweet when they announced the new team, it was like, this is our roster for the stage 4 LAN. They literally said that in the tweet rather than saying for the last week of stage 3, like they almost forgot it was a thing. But still, a lot of people have been discussing the last 24 hours or so, do LA Thieves need to bring Draza in? Because Draza goes straight into challenges and wins like the Challenger Cup or whatever, running an SMG on this kind of team of thrown together players. We've got Parasite on the flank talking about how Draza's an incredible SMG. He can really run that role effectively. If anything, that's his like natural role, and he kind of fit into whatever Thieves needed him to do. And you know, I don't doubt him, right? I think Draza has been incredibly talented, and seems to be a really great attitude on a team as well. That's one thing I see with Draza, is that like he has a great hunger to like he really he feels really blessed, I think, for him to be on this team and getting the opportunity, and has a great hunger to win and improve and get better and to learn. Those things make for a potentially great player. TJ, I would argue, has been underwhelming the entire year. I think the statistics bear that out in reality. Pretty much been the case for a couple of years now. You could even argue for nigh on 3 years. Is his time in the team up, Austin, if they do not perform at this major? And will Draza come back in? Because I can certainly see a world in which that happens. We've already seen plenty of roster changes for Thieves. That's what they like to do.
Yeah, I honestly, I think every single player on this team's like roster is in like a hot seat if they don't perform well. So Draza was one of those like kind of question marks when they benched him. I didn't think he was underperforming. I thought he was kind of like pretty stable. I think Draza is a player like. He's not there. He's not going to like take over games, but he's not going to lose you any games, and he's going to be a really consistent force that just locks down lanes or makes plays when you need it. So, I didn't see the reasoning behind him being benched, which again goes to what I said at the beginning. It didn't really seem it seemed like it was kind of like forced into this decision into the roster. So, if they perform bad, because right now they play LAG first, right?
Yep.
They honestly, that's a tough matchup. It doesn't sound like it, but the way Thieves is very free flowing, the fundamentals aren't 100%, and even as like a new team, that's even going to be worse. LEG relies on they're pretty fundamentally correct on almost every mode, but they just don't have the slaying power to keep up with everyone else. So they rely on you giving them the free kills. So that matchup is honestly. It reminds me, I think, of stage 1, where I was like, that's a scary matchup. So that's not like if I'm LA Thieves, I would have rather played like Seattle or London, the high flying teams that you can kind of match with aggression and you have the talent to win that. So if they don't perform and drop within the first like 1 or 2 rounds, I do see a world where they make another change. It's tough because they just haven't had the stability all season.
Yeah, I mean, that's also crazy about the situation, right? They're going to LAN, which you'd think, all right, back in the CWL days, we're going to LAN, we're going to play like 8 series, right? Because you're going to play all your group play ones against the team for the amateur bracket and then see what happens in the bracket. They could play 1 series here and just go out, right? And then it's like, well, what do we do now? What is it? They had their chance, right? They could have 3 at OpTic and still made winners. That was, it was in their hands in a sense. But yeah, I think big questions. I agree. LAG is one of those teams that when they played each other in stage 1, as you were just mentioning, if you guys listening haven't maybe forgot about it or whatever, but they played in maybe the first round, or they played, actually no, I think it was maybe the winners bracket, actually. Yeah, it was the
we
winners.
played the winner of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We talked of course, we talked about it on the podcast at the time that you thought a potential upset was brewing here. And Los Angeles Guerrillas 3-0'd them at the time, with for both teams a similar squad, right? Because at the time for LAG, it was with Vivid instead of Chino, and for Thieves at the time, that was when Slasher, Kenny, TJ, and Temp was the team. So all things considered, relatively similar teams in relatively similar positions, right? Because I don't know, at the time, Thieves were considered like, well, after that loss, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the entire game. LAG are kind of sitting down there now, but Thieves, man, it's just a tough one. If they lose this, it's like, I mean, it's just not enough sample size. That's the thing. If they lose this series, it's like, I would love to see them like win a couple, right? Like win a couple and see how it goes. Because if you're JKap trying to make a call after you lost to LAG, it's like, what do I do? Do I get rid of Slasher? Like, is it over? Like, is him on LAN like awful? But it's literally one series, so I guess we'll talk about it next week. But it's just tough to be them right now. Like, it's tough to know what to do. You don't have too many luxuries. At least they're going to make champs. I guess that is a positive.
Yeah, that's like a luxury that I forget that other teams don't have, because like us, Toronto, New York, like it doesn't matter how we do this major. Like obviously you want to win. Obviously it's a LAN, you want to win that, you want to win the prize money, but like for the end of the season, like losing this does not matter. It all matters how you do it champs. But for teams like LA, I always forget, honestly, because like they honestly have, like, time is not a luxury for them. Like they have to perform, and if they don't perform, they're on the chopping block, even for this major, if they don't do well. So it's honestly like, for us, like the pressure level is different, So like for them, this is like the same pressure as like a champs, because their job is literally on the line. So it's just tough to play at that pressure. So it's kind of like, I don't know. There's just so many levels to it for them that I do feel bad for some of those players and that staff there. So it's a really, really tough situation.
Yeah, so I mean, it's tough for everyone involved, to be honest, like having to deal with this. But yeah, that is the bracket. I mean, I guess we'll talk through some of the key matchups. So winners round one, we've got New York Subliners versus Rokkr. The winner of that plays FaZe. On the lower side, we've got OpTic versus Empire. Winner of that plays Ultra. On the losers' end, Thieves play Guerrillas first round. The winner of that plays Mutineers. And then Ravens versus Surge. They'll also play on the first day. Loser of that goes home. The winner of that plays Paris. So, I mean, I don't know. It's basically what you'd expect pretty much from this bracket. What are the key matchups you're keeping an eye on? Of course, we've talked about Thieves, Guerrillas. I guess OpTic versus Empire is certainly a key one to me. And if OpTic win that, they'll have the rematch against Ultra, which would be great to see. I think you guys will be relatively happy with how this has worked out for FaZe. I mean, Rokkr, you'd think might be favourites against Subliners with the roster change that they're going to be forced to make, it seems. So, yeah, early thoughts on this bracket, Austin. Of course, really all you got to do is win 3 series, job done, win the major. And if you can get to the grand finals again, I think pretty much anyone's going to be hard-pressed to beat you in a best of 9.
Yeah, so I mean, first, right off the rip, obviously the Chicago and Dallas one, that one sticks out. Honestly, that side of the bracket is going to be a bloodbath. My money's on Chicago right now. I really want to see that Chicago Ultra rematch, because obviously the last time it went to the raid map 5. I do think Toronto, like us in Toronto, the way both of us play in our map pool and like our strengths being like very good at S&D and control, almost every other team we're a terrible matchup for. So like that's like the thing with like New York, because hardpoint is honestly a lot easier to steal. Like a very good hardpoint team, it's easier for them to lose compared to a very good like control or S&D team in my mind. So that's why like being very good at like the S&D and the controls is like so valuable, especially in a best of 9. So I think that's a really tough task for Chicago, and if they do beat that, it's honestly like amazing. It's something that you're going to build off of for the end of the year. Looking ahead for the losers bracket for a couple more rounds up, I do think Florida will move up to that round 3, regardless of who they play. Florida versus, I think it would be whoever loses between New York and Minnesota, I believe. I think that would be an insane matchup, whoever it is, whether it's Minnesota or New York. I still think New York, even though they don't have Asim, they're still going to be one of the top 6, top 7 team in this tournament. So that's a really great matchup for Florida. So I think that's one where you have to win, and if you lose that, you're like looking at it as like a huge missed opportunity to keep moving up in this tournament. So those are just the 2 that stick out right away to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you've already kind of talked about who you think your dark horse is for the tourney in Mutineers. I think that's certainly a good shout. Like, I don't know. Before the OpTic series, I wanted to put some faith in Thieves. I think a lot of people had some faith in Thieves before the OpTic series because Slasher is kind of the king of the lower bracket. Now, whether they can catch fire and make a run like this, that is a complete other question. I just don't see any of LAG, London, Surge, or Legion making a run beyond a couple of rounds. So that's almost out of the question. So I think in the lower side, like Thieves, Mutineers, but again, I think Florida should be favourites in that series, even if Thieves do beat Gorilla. So it's tough to say. As you say, on the winner's side as well, I do wonder what happens here. I don't know. Like, who do you think is making Championship Sunday? I don't know how it's working this time, whether we have 4 or 5, but I mean,
3, I think.
Okay, interesting. So, oh yeah, sorry, 3 or 4. But yeah, so maybe it's going back to how it was. So obviously, FaZe Ultra, easy predictions, I guess, in the grand finals. Third place is tough because, I mean, I guess you have to give it to OpTic right now, Austin, but it's who knows what happens, honestly. But there's a lot of teams that could do some damage here.
Yeah, if I had to pick 3, because I think that's what it's going to be, I think obviously I have to go to our team. Again, there's no advantage for coming out of winners bracket. So, I mean, honestly, whoever at winners final is obviously still going to be a bigger matchup. But if they do switch it back to the 3, it's not as big anymore. But I honestly think it would probably be us in Toronto. That would be the first 2. And I do think OpTic, even if they do like slip up versus Toronto or Dallas, I still have a lot of faith for them to actually make that lower bracket run because they would play multiple matches and within a single day on that Saturday. So I would have a lot of faith in them to gain momentum throughout the day and really feel good going into that championship Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in like a LAN environment, I suppose. And I guess that's another thought, right? Like, do you think there's going to be significant differences here going to LAN? Because that's been the big discussion, right? There's obviously no crowds. I don't think the casters are going to be there in person, but still, on LAN, across the stage from the other guys, kind of like how the Pro League used to be done a couple of years ago. We're talking about it as if everything's going to be exactly the same. And I agree. I think everything's pretty much going to be exactly the same. Will we see that play out to any degree? There are some teams here. You look at Mutineers. You're looking at, I mean, I was actually going to mention it when you were talking about Mutineers, the fact that Neptune has been phenomenal as of late, Awakening also. But there's some players on that team that haven't competed at LAN on this level before. Does that play into the factor, especially if they do play Thieves, for example, and Slasher's on the other side of the stage? You know, he's there looking like Slasher, pretty scary guy, probably, you know, looking you in the eyes and doing mind games, stuff like this. Maybe it's
Honestly, I don't think any of it does. The only thing with LAN is the game slows down a little bit. So the teams that can switch up gears a little bit better will prove. But honestly, it's kind of funny, like listening to like everyone say like, "Oh, LAN's coming, we're gonna be so much better." When in reality, like honestly, the best teams that are playing right now online are going to be just as good on LAN. And the only thing that because like there's no crowd, so it's not like you're facing the pressures of the crowd. It's basically just like you're just playing there in front of your teammates, and it's not even like you're facing the other team either. So it's there's not as much like pressure. I don't know. So honestly, I don't like the best teams online are going to be the best teams on LAN. It's not going to change. It's basically like the teams that have the best teamwork are winning online. And I think online's a disadvantage to that. So, yeah, you have like the peakers advantage and stuff like that. So if you're winning consistently online, it's because of your fundamentals and your teamwork, and that's what makes you thrive on LAN. So, like, yeah, I don't know. I just think it's funny. Most of these guys are just saying that to try to boost their own confidence because that's pretty much what this change is doing. Is you're just saying, "Oh, we're gonna be good on LAN." Like you're boosting up your confidence for that. But I don't see anything major shifting. Yeah, until we get a crowd and until that presence is felt that way.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you know, you're going to be forced to eat your words when Los Angeles Gorillas come out, smoke through the lower bracket, and win this entire thing without losing a map. So that's where my money's going. Pretty sure you can bet on LAG to win and get like 2,000 to 1. So that's still, you're throwing money down the drain, I would well argue. The final topic that I did want to dive into before we finish, because there was some discussion on this last week, and I think this is a kind of a good time to do so, is regarding viewership, because there's always talk about viewership about this time of the year. I think like the technical peak for last stage was like 62,000 or something that just came out, or at least for the regular season play for some OpTic game, whatever. You know how it tends to go. But look, viewership at this time of the year always tends to start well, declines to some degree. Stage 3 major Ultra versus OpTic, like 130k, was fantastic. We mentioned it at the time. But for the regular season games, obviously it's fallen off somewhat. And understandably so. There's a lot going on right now. Actual sports are back on and being played. The Euros, for example, is on right now. There's a lot of things that people want to watch over Call of Duty, especially regular league matches that, in the grand scheme of things, don't really mean too much. There's a few angles on this, though, right? Because the LAN major returning, does that affect viewership to some degree? Personally, I think it does. I think people are going to be more excited and more interested to see what happens, the players actually being there in person. I think that might be one of the factors why the viewership has been a little bit lower. Like, there's a little bit less to it. Maybe that'll only be a short-term boost, but something nonetheless. And then the other side of things is this whole like World Series of Warzone being streamed on Twitch exclusively, and whether that means, because the CDL right now, YouTube deal. We don't know when the YouTube deal ends, but I don't think they'll have signed it for like 5 years or something. I guess it'd have been a relatively short-term deal, especially with the World Series of Warzone stuff being Twitch exclusive. Seems to me Activision, the CDL, are thinking, they're looking at Valorant, they're looking at other games and realizing, hang on a second, this whole co-streaming trends has been huge for other esports. If we can tap into that, like I can imagine a world in which Nick Merckx is streaming FaZe versus OpTic, and he's pulling in easy 50k added on to what the stream's doing. So there's opportunities like that which have potential, and that's why I'm super optimistic about this in general. But maybe that's something that they can exploit, Austin. Somewhat tough to say, but viewership always kind of dies off and then ramps up again for champs.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of people just like being negative. A lot of people forget, in like literally Black Ops 4, we had matches, like league matches that had like 8k viewership, 9k viewership. So people forget that. Honestly, like even at the lowest, like at the worst matchup of the stage, we had like 25k viewers. So honestly, it's a regular season match. You're not going to have 100k viewers for that. And COD has been on consistently for 4 months now. Like, and we're in the middle of the season, middle of the game cycle. Summer is happening. Honestly, even Twitch viewership, where there's like a study about it, on the weekends during the summer, it's actually worse than during the week. So it's just a whole bunch of factors coming in right now. So I don't know. I just think it's a lot of people just being negative. On the Warzone side, honestly, like I think Warzone is going to absolutely crush viewership for this, because you got to think there's 150 people in this lobby. They're probably all going to be streaming as well. So you're probably going to have probably close to 1 million viewers just for this. I do think this is a good look for the future. When you look at every person that's in the league, like every identity, so like FaZe, for example, we have so many personalities like within FaZe Clan that absolutely loves Call of Duty that would co-stream this in a second. You think Nick Merckx, you think PaulEhx, you think even Temper or any of the owners, and I'm obviously forgetting like 1 million people, but there's so many people that would co-stream our matches. And then you think London, you have Vicstar, who is huge over in UK. He would co-stream in a second. In Dallas, you have all the Envy guys. You have TP, who's like their creator right now. He would be co-streaming. Under Thieves, you have Courage, you have Nadeshot, you have a gazillion other people that would do it in a heartbeat. And so like even in like Valorant, when there was having like their tournaments in the middle of the week, like their main stream was getting like 50k viewers, which is the same that we're getting, but the co-streamers were getting like 800,000. So that's where the bulk of it's going to come from. And if we do have co-streaming in the future, like that's where our bulk of it's going to come from too. But honestly, I think it would be a huge step in the right direction. But on the other side of the coin, like when they did sign the YouTube deal, like co-streaming wasn't a thing yet. So, and I do think the YouTube has been a positive for Call of Duty as a whole, and I think it's done like pretty much great work for the scene, even though people don't like to admit that, because the VODs of the matches and stuff do great numbers, and the live stream. The live stream, even though it's not killing it, like absolutely destroying numbers, it's doing pretty good compared to other leagues that do regular season matches, even in like CS. So, are we putting up League of Legends numbers? No, but we're not League of Legends. We're not on that size. So, I think people have to realize that we're getting 50K viewers for league matches, and we've never had that before. So it's not wonderful. We're not in like the dream world, but it's solid for online, and it's solid for the world we're in right now. And hopefully just next year they start a little bit earlier, like in like December, so then we can kind of piggyback off that excitement at the beginning of the year for when the game drops.
I think you've nailed pretty much all the key points there. The other thing regarding YouTube that's like, I think a lot of people have talked about it, and I do wonder if like the deal ends with YouTube. Do they sign an exclusivity deal with Twitch? Do they just do it on both? I mean, they could do, because people are saying on YouTube they really like it. The fact that they can rewind, certainly I think that's great, because
that's my favorite part.
It's actually the most annoying thing ever on Twitch. The fact that like if I want to pause it or whatever to screenshot the stats and put them into whatever, like on Twitch it brings up a thing in the middle of the screen. If you miss something, you can't go back. If I want to go back and like grab a screenshot of someone with their head in their hands or whatever for a thumbnail, I can easily do it. But on Twitch, you have to take a clip and then you scroll back, and it's just an effort. So there are reasons why YouTube I think is great, and also YouTube has at least, I'm pretty sure, I don't know exactly what the stat is, but there's like 10 times the audience on YouTube just for gaming content that there is on Twitch. So
yeah,
like probably even more, to be honest. Like the potential base is enormous, and I think that YouTube is slowly getting there at actually putting live streams in the right people's hands or in their eyes, because YouTube's algorithm is insanely good at giving people what they want in terms of VOD, actual videos, but in putting a live stream in front of them, they're actually going to want to watch right now over a normal video. Maybe they haven't quite nailed that yet. I think it'll continue to improve.
YouTube is the future of gaming. I still believe that, but like I think Call of Duty got in just a little bit too early, and I believe in like 10 years, like YouTube would be a great play, but just right now it's just kind of tough. So I do think it would be sweet to go over to Twitch, have that co-streaming, and then not have exclusivity between the two platforms. Just be able to do both, because I think there's positives in both, but we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, and I'll go back and watch on MLG.TV, baby. Let's go. Those are the days when, oh my God, wonderful stuff. Anyway, that'll do it for the episode. Fantastic stuff. We'll get back to viewer questions next week. We just had an awful lot to talk about today. So yeah, if you'd like to leave any questions that we'll discuss next time around, join the Discord. Link will be down below in that podcast questions channel. Leave your thoughts. But yeah, just before you finish off the episode, Austin, any final words, I suppose? Good luck, of course, for the rest of the week. Going to be, you guys are once again at winner's bracket. Actually, I didn't really mention it, but you guys broke your own, not your own, but broke the map win streak record now at 13. You're also on the way potentially to break your own series win record once again. And if you win the major, you'll be pretty close indeed if you don't lose the series. So yeah, confident going into the week, I imagine.
Yeah, guys are extremely confident. We just came in and had a really good stage yet again. So there's nothing to worry about yet for us. So we're kind of this business as usual. So but definitely, last time we were on LAN, obviously, I think excluding the LA event, which is when like COVID was just hitting, we won our own home series. The core of our team won the last champs that was on LAN. So all of our guys are extremely confident and just ready to get back to work and have a really good major.
Absolutely. It's going to be a cracking one to watch. Thanks all of you for watching and listening at home. We will certainly be seeing you this time next week with another episode of the Breaking Point podcast. Thanks, Easy Mac and Lion Man, for joining me as they have done on the show. Thanks for watching as always. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.